South Portland, and I'd like to try and clear up a few misconceptions about what the Waterfront Protection Ordinance would do if it was passed. And I was at the meeting in August where I saw the members of the oil industry get up and say, we're going to give you the facts. We want everybody to have all the facts. They haven't given us any facts. They've given us a bunch of speculation that's based on false premises, including the report that the gentleman just cited, which I'm not sure if everybody saw that, but the report was commissioned. The man was paid $15,000 to say, to give the economic impact if every business on the waterfront was suddenly gone. And that's not what the WPO would do, as we've already heard. It doesn't affect any existing businesses. Its sole purpose is to keep tar sands out of this community. And I've seen this cited over and over again. And Bill Nemitz in his column in the Press Herald the other day evidently spoke with a gentleman who commissioned the study, and he said he stands by his study, but not necessarily by the way it's been applied by the oil industry and the people that are coming out in support of the oil industry. Because, again, that's not what would happen. And the fire department, again, mentioned in an article I saw in the paper that this ordinance would prohibit them, any upgrades to protect from fires or whatnot. And I want to read. I'm quoting directly from the ordinance here, which I wonder if the oil companies provided to the fire department before they got them to come out in their favor. And I'm going to quote this section from the ordinance. This prohibition is not subject to waiver or variance under any provision of this code unless necessary to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act, fire codes, or pollution control regulations imposed on existing facilities with respect to their existing use. And we've heard other people come out time and time again saying this goes too far. A woman from the Historical Society wrote that it goes, that it goes too far and would have unintended consequences. Sprague has said that they are going to have to put their planned renovations on hold. But meanwhile, the Water Protection Ordinance group has come out and said they're actually in favor of what Sprague's doing. And in the paper, he kind of had to admit, the spokesman for Sprague or the executive, that yeah, they weren't really so much on hold. Maybe it was just a question of semantics. We also have the Portland Pipeline Company themselves. So I want to remind anybody, they may have been a good neighbor in the past, and maybe they will be in the future, but they are owned by ExxonMobil. And what ExxonMobil says goes. It doesn't matter whether any of the employees or the CEO of Portland Pipeline don't like it. If they don't like it, they will be replaced by ExxonMobil, who runs the company. But we've been told there's no current plans. They keep using that wording, and it's only after the people in support of the Waterfront Protection Ordinance went out and showed people around this town the existing permit that they had to construct this from the state, that just at the last minute last week in a PR stunt they revoked the permit. There's nothing that says they can't go get a new one as soon as they want to. And there seems to be a common thread to me in the people that have come out opposed to the Waterfront Protection Ordinance, and that's money. And they don't have volunteers because they're paying people to go door to door and advocate for their position. And I was joking with a friend about, I don't understand why the fire department would come out like this. Maybe they got a new fire truck. And then I read the report from Channel 6 that they've actually received 2 in the past. And then I find out that the Historical Society owes their building to the Portland Pipeline Company. So they've been spreading a lot of money around town, and I think I'd be a little naive to think that past gifts and paying some volunteers $15 an hour or whatever it is they're making is all the money that they've spent. Which brings me to the current City Council and the position that 5 of you specifically took. And from what I understand, didn't even have the common decency to tell the mayor that you were going to take. Now everybody has a right to their opinion, but a little common decency would have been nice to a very decent person like the mayor, and it's also borderline illegal, which I expect is why Mr. Jalbert made sure he went to everybody one by one instead of as a group. So, I mean, you should be ashamed of yourselves. I'm sure that you're not. To say that this ordinance goes too far, it goes exactly far enough.
Esteemed Council, Mayor Blake, city employees, neighbors and friends, thank you for your time. My name is Todd Erickson. I live in South Portland. And I was outraged and disappointed this week to learn that the firefighters, who are paid employees of the city of South Portland, took a position on the waterfront protection ordinance. It seems to me that any current employee of the city of South Portland, whose salary is being paid by a taxpayer, should not be taking positions as part of a group, especially a position on an ordinance that was initiated by its citizens. If not illegal, it certainly raises the question of its ethics. If they want to take a position as a resident and a taxpayer, that seems very appropriate, as I am, employee of the company with whom I am employed. Former South Portland Fire Chief Phil McGoldrick has come out in support of the oil company's position on the WPO. Chief McGoldrick openly stated how grateful he was for the money Portland Pipeline provided his equipment, specifically money that allowed him to attend their out-of-state conferences. He made statements at a council meeting suggesting it was okay to, quote, grease the skids. Quote, when he smelled oil, he smelled money. And quote, if there was ever a situation where he didn't see eye to eye with the oil companies, they would take him to a conference and he would have his mind changed. While I don't agree with what he said, he has the right as a resident and an individual to express his opinion. Quite frankly, the kind of money that changes minds scares me. But the collective actions of the fire department, many of whom don't even live in South Portland, is puzzling, if not inappropriate, and perhaps entirely unethical. Ponder this question, if you will. Why are the firefighters, whose job it is to protect the health and safety of its citizens from potential environmental and safety hazards, supporting tar sands and the expansion of potentially dangerous operations coming into our city? On the fire department's own website, it states, quote, South Portland is home to one of the largest oil ports on the East Coast, with 7 bulk liquid petroleum terminals, the largest rail yard in New England, a chemical storage facility, 2 semiconductor plants, and the largest retail complex north of Boston. These commercial facilities present a challenge to our first responders. The department spends hundreds of hours annually to train for these unique hazards not found in other communities in Maine. I implore all of us to consider why, then, our own fire department would want to increase the hazardous risks which they acknowledge already pose a challenge to the city, its residents, and the safety of their own firefighters. What motivation could they possibly have for adding to this risk by supporting the oil company's position, which is to bring tar sands as opposed to citizens who want to keep tar sands out? Their logic is the same as a physician recommending to a patient with genetic predisposition for lung disease to take up smoking. Job security. Does this make any sense to you? It doesn't make any sense to me at all. Has anyone else seen the full-page ad in local newspapers from the firefighters? Those ads cost thousands of dollars. Is that where our donations and our budget is going? I don't think so. Maybe they've taken up the charge from the former chief, and when they smell oil, they smell money. If you have any doubt, look closely at the bottom of their full-page ad in the October 18th issue of South Portland Cape Elizabeth Century, where it is printed, authorized, paid for by the Maine Energy Marketers Association, i.e. the oil companies, Brunswick, Maine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Erickson.
Rosemary Andrews, Pleasantdale. It's taken a long time to come public with my position on this issue, and I finally decided that for what it's worth, it was time for me to say something I feel like this campaign has been based in scare tactics. And with the work that I do at the community college, I see scare tactics that are used inside countries where genocide occurs, where there is a lack of truth and there is a lack of education on an issue. And it incites fear, and it has resulted in people killing their neighbors and even their own family members. This is driven by money here, nothing short of money. There is big money in tar sands. So big that oil companies have already spent over $140,000 fighting against this ordinance. Regarding Mayor Blake's position, I would argue that Mr. McGoldrick is wrong. I am not a personal fan of Mayor Blake, so no one can accuse me of defending him out of friendship. We are not friends. But I will defend him because he is entitled to his position. He is one of 7 elected only as mayor by his peers, not by this community at large. He is not expected to be neutral. He is expected to take a position because he will eventually take a vote. And he is entitled to that position publicly, as is every councilor. He did that publicly. There was no error in that action. The error was the other 5 councilors. Whether Mr. Jalbert went to each person individually or not begs the legality of this letter. The result was a position taken by 5 councilors without a public meeting or a public discussion. You were wrong, Mr. Jalbert. This warrants further investigation and a legal opinion, which I request as a taxpayer and a citizen. As a former councilor, I attended training on council ethics, and this action does not come close to passing a test of appropriate ethical standards. So Councilors Cohen, Livingston, Linscott, Jalbert, and Popp were wrong to sign a letter in secret. It was not done at a public meeting. The position was not taken at a public meeting, as was Mayor Blake's position. You were legally in violation of the Freedom of Information Act. It is abominable behavior, and all of you should be embarrassed and should publicly apologize, and particularly Mr. Jalbert, who instigated the entire process. I demand that the behavior be reviewed. I disagree with Kathy DeFilippo. It's before us now. These pipelines run dangerously close to Sebago Lake. Protect our water, our environment, and our quality of life. We have the deepest harbors along the East Coast. Oil in South Portland is not going away. They need us. It's based in fear and meant to frighten you. Don't be afraid. You can do this. Vote yes on the WTO and protect our community. Thank you.
My name is Evan Rose. I live on Buchanan Street. I really don't work for Exxon. This is part of the theatric guard that came to also that check.
Thanks.
I appreciate articulate arguments that come from both sides. I attended the city council meeting on the 19th of August, and even flat for some whose ideas I generally don't agree with. But I think the important thing is that there are articulate arguments, there are clear arguments, and that we can really know what's on the table and what we're making a bargain for. I was motivated to become much more active in this campaign when I saw what I refer to as the blue blitz around town. The signs represented here: save our working waterfront, don't sink our port. I'm making signs in my own backyard that's going to counter this. It's co-opting the same graphics, hopefully you'll see them, but I'm limited on what I can physically do in my backyard, because I'm not paid to do it. You'll see them, it says, don't sink tar sands into our waterfront, save our working waterfront from tar sands, et cetera. Because it's never been about saving the working waterfront. It's a ploy. This Lawton report that was mentioned a couple times in tonight's session, it's a straw man. It talks about closing the entire waterfront. We all know that that's not what this is about. Yet many of the people in this community seem to be convinced that that's what it's about, because that's what's on the sign. Save our working waterfront. It's never been under threat. So I look at it from it's always good to have, I guess, a different perspective. I like hearing a lot of different perspectives. I like hearing the needs of the people who are concerned about their tax base going up. That is a real concern, I suppose. If any big business closes, and Portland-Montreal pipeline is a big sugar daddy for this community. They've been a great citizen for this community. As has been mentioned in one of the earlier presentations this evening, there's no guarantee that that's going to continue in the future. I would submit that the proposal to reverse the flow and load tankers, and with the commensurate smokestacks that has gotten the ire up of citizens' initiative that results in the Waterfront Protection Ordinance, but that's a bad management move. It set people off, set me off. We all know that that's why we're here. It's not specifically about tar sands, although many people are motivated because of that. It's because we don't want a new industry coming in, and this is a new industry. It's a completely new business plan. It's not just some modification of existing plan. They're reversing the flow of the pipeline. That brings with it a whole host of other things, of other issues, safety issues, health issues, global environmental issues. And the Citizens Initiative is about preventing that. So if they wanted to build a refinery on the waterfront because market flexibility requires it, we would probably feel more justified as citizens saying no to this. You know, dilbit requires partial refining before you can put it into a tanker. That's what the smokestacks are all about. But yet, somehow that's okay? No, it's not okay. It's not okay. That's not part of the comprehensive plan. And speaking of the comprehensive plan, I think it's important for us all to consider what would happen in 10, 20, 30, 60 years when the Portland-Montreal pipeline no longer has a buyer for its service, which is the reason why it's positioning itself the way it is now. If Canada gets its oil internally, and Montreal no longer needs its supply of oil from this port, then what's the Portland-Montreal pipeline going to do? You know, we all know that this is, or we can hope anyway, that this is a dying industry. We can hope that. We can hope that because it's killing us. We all know it. It's killing us. It's killing the second and third generation. So what are we going to do in 10, 20, 30, 60 years when the Portland-Montreal pipeline, because of market pressures, has no business model anymore? What's going to happen with all these tank farms? Their $1 million coverage, $1 million required state coverage, is that going to cover brownfield remediation? So what is the plan? What is the plan for that? I hope that this council can be a little bit more creative and proactive in implementing its own comprehensive plan to keep that real possibility open. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. And it looks like we are getting close to the last call. Is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak? Yes.
Good evening. I'm Margaret Donahue. I live in South Portland, and I'm here tonight because I am very disappointed in how the city is operating and acting with regards to this upcoming election, specifically with regards to the Waterfront Protection Ordinance. There's such a strong feeling of impropriety with how elected officials in this room are acting, and I'm really angry about it. I have 3 examples that highlight this impropriety that I want to share with all of you, and mostly with the taxpayers and the residents who live in the city, who elect you. As taxpayers, we all deserve to know about all of this. I have 3 examples for you. Example 1. Last week, 5 South Portland City Councilors, Cohen, Linscott, Livingston, Pock, and Jalbert, announced collaborative opposition as city councilors to the waterfront protection ordinance. Councilor Jalbert led this group. He admitted to devising a scheme to get around the public meeting law. Mr. Jalbert was quoted in the Portland Press-Herald as saying that he was aware of the open meeting law that prohibits councilors from interacting without public notice. So he personally drafted the letter and contacted the other 4 councilors via telephone to get their support. In the Forecaster, dated October 18th, Councilor Jalbert said the letter was signed independently without a meeting of the councilors after he consulted with the South Portland City Corporation Council, Sally Daggett, on how not to violate open meeting laws. You should be ashamed of yourself. Our very own city attorney, Sally Daggett, is advising city councilors on how to get around a state law regarding open meeting law. She should immediately resign for unethical behavior. South Portland taxpayers deserve a higher standard of lawyer behavior for the money we spend on legal counsel. Mr. Gailey, were you aware that Councilor Jalbert was seeking legal consultation with our city attorney about this? Was this done with your approval as the city manager? Can you believe this? It's outrageous. Example number 2. My husband, 3 children, and I are at Wainwright Fields each Saturday for soccer games. Each week this fall, there have been tables run by the Vote No on the Waterfront Protection Ordinance. They have had tables where they're giving away fancy soccer balls, granola bars, juice, candy, along with pamphlets explaining their spin of the referendum. This past weekend, there was a huge oil truck parked in the most visible spot with a sign on it from the group that wants the Waterfront Protection Ordinance to fail. Along with the truck, there was even a police officer in uniform standing next to the oil truck. At Wainwright Fields, what does this have to do with my children playing soccer, recreational soccer? Absolutely nothing. I co-led a $41.5 million referendum in this city for a new high school 3 years ago. Many citizens in this community worked so very hard to save our high school from losing its accreditation. You all see the new high school being built now. We spent months and months working tirelessly for the South Portland Public Schools. Our political action group, Renew SPHS, wanted to share information with parents at Wainwright during the soccer season about the high school. We called City Hall and spoke with Jim Daly to get permission. We were told no. We were told that we could not have a table at the soccer fields because it would make parents feel uncomfortable. Let me say that again. Our political action committee, made up of South Portland residents, taxpayers, and parents, could not have a table at Wainwright Fields where all of our children play soccer because it would make parents feel uncomfortable. All these children, by the way, go to South Portland schools. As a city, you did nothing to support our school referendum, and now you're rolling out the red carpet for these big oil companies? Each and every day, the oil companies are at the soccer fields telling parents things that are not true. All number 2 heating oil will have to be trucked in from Massachusetts. The main mall may close because so many families will lose jobs. The oil company will not be able to follow the federal DEP regulations. Yeah, right. And my favorite, millions of families will lose jobs. Oil is not our largest industry. Tourism is. What about
20 seconds, please.
Does that make... What about oil companies giving treats to our kids and free soccer balls, coffee, and donuts? Example 3, I was told that there's going to be a press conference at the South Portland Fire Station last week. Across from the street, the fire department had firefighters that had a press conference. And one of the first South Portland firefighters spoke out, said, "We as the South Portland Fire Department do not know if we can keep city residents safe."
Mr. Time's up.
I was an undecided voter, and I am voting yes. And I am very disappointed in the 5 of you.
Thank you, Mr. Anyone else? Peter Stanton, 20 Deep Street. Good evening, councilors, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to speak in favor of the waterfront protection ordinance. The zoning change incorporated And the WPO is the only means available to the voters of South Portland to stop tar sands oil from coming to our city, bringing with it the risks of oil spills and toxic gas emissions. I'd like to think we could count on you as our elected representatives, or the South Portland Planning Board, or the State Department of Environmental Protection. But your actions at this point, and I speak specifically to Councilors Jalbert, Cohen, Lynn Scott, Livingston, and Park, have disappointed you. You write that you believe in a compromise solution, yet you spend 4 months doing nothing. Nothing to bring about a negotiated solution. In my opinion, you failed to lead us toward a solution that is any better than the WPO. I can't find anything in the WPO that brings on the dire consequences claimed by the opposition. Lawyers for both sides have reached opposite conclusions, and not being a lawyer, I'm comfortable letting the courts decide. I choose instead to judge the opposition based on things that I can understand. For instance, on August 19th, the president of the Portland Pipeline told you, many of us were there, that there were no plans to reverse the pipeline. In fact, he'd already applied for and received a permit and an extension for that permit, allowing a pipeline reversal project. Does that sound like no plans to you? That same meeting, an engineer for the Portland Pipeline told you that diluted bitumen, the industry name for tar sands oil, had the same components as conventional crude oil. His careful phrasing was designed to mislead you because the proportions of those diluted bitumen components are radically different from conventional crude oil, leading to extremely different behavior when a spill occurs. Crude oil floats when spilled in water, and we all know how to clean it up. Every time a tanker unloads, it's surrounded with floating booms to contain a possible spill. Tar sands oil, or diluted bitumen, is a thick, tarry goop which is diluted with toxic chemicals to make it flow. When spilled in water, the toxic solvents quickly evaporate into the air where people can breathe them and get sick. Meanwhile, that tarry goop sinks to the bottom where it leaches benzene, polycyclic hydrocarbons, and heavy metals to poison the aquatic environment. What the oil industry doesn't tell you is that they don't have a proven technology for cleaning it up. So when the spokespeople for the Portland Pipeline deliberately try to mislead you, mislead us, how can you possibly trust them in a negotiation? The Portland-Montreal Pipeline is not the first 1940s vintage pipeline considered for reversal to move tar sands oil out of Canada to the global market. There have already been 2 disastrous tar sands spills in pipelines built in the 40s and 50s. In July of 2010, an Enbridge energy pipeline ruptured near Marshall, Michigan, and spilled 1 million gallons of diluted bitumen in the Kalamazoo River. They've spent 3 years and $1 billion trying to clean it up and are still not finished. And just last March, an ExxonMobil pipeline ruptured in Mayflower, Arkansas, spilling 350,000 gallons of tar sands oil, which ran through street sewers to a lake. All along the 236 miles from Montreal to Portland, there are communities who fear becoming the next Marshall, Michigan, or Mayflower, Arkansas. They don't get a say in whether 140,000 barrels per day, and that's 5.8 million gallons, of tar sands oil is piped through their towns. But we in South Portland can have a say because the pipeline needs waterfront loading facilities and a pair of 70-foot smokestacks to burn off the toxic solvents. We don't need to ask the state EPA, the planning board, or the city council to keep the tar sands out. We can do it ourselves by voting for the WPO on November 5th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. King.